In the old world, before restaurants had names, before food came wrapped in paper and plastic, there was a village. A village like many others, nestled between the arms of ancient hills, where the river sang every morning and the roosters knew when to cry. And in this village, there lived a woman. A large woman. A woman whose laughter could shake the dust off rooftops. A woman whose hips swayed like the pendulum of time itself. Her arms were thick like the trunk of a baobab, and her smile, oh, her smile was the kind that made you forget your troubles. Her name was Mama Obele. And she could cook. She could cook like the gods themselves had whispered recipes into her ears while she slept. Mama Obele was not born into wealth. No. She was born in the smallest hut at the edge of the village, where the walls were made of tired mud and the roof leaked when the rains were angry. Her father was a farmer who could barely feed his own household, and her mother, a quiet woman with sad eyes, died before Obele saw her 10th dry season. So Obele learned early. She learned that life does not wait for you to be ready. She learned that hunger does not knock, it breaks down the door. By the time she was a young woman, Obele had discovered one thing she could do better than anyone: cook. She would take the simplest ingredients, a handful of groundnuts, dried fish no bigger than a finger, wild herbs that grew near the river, and she would turn them into meals that made grown men close their eyes and moan with satisfaction. Word spread. First, it traveled from hut to hut. Then, from compound to compound. And before long, Mama Obele set up a small wooden bench under the great Iroko tree in the center of the village market. She sold food. Jollof that glistened like it had been kissed by the evening sun. Pounded yam so smooth it could make a sculptor weep. Soup so rich and thick that one taste could make you forget your own name. People came. Farmers. Traders. Travelers. Even the chief's own messengers would sneak away from the palace to eat at Mama Obele's bench. She grew. She prospered. Her small bench became 2 benches. Then 4. Then she built a wooden stall with a roof of palm fronds. And Mama Obele herself grew with her business, her body round and full, a testament, she said, to the quality of her own cooking. If the cook is thin, she would say, slapping her wide belly and laughing, then the food is a lie. And the people laughed with her. They loved her. They trusted her. Oh, how they trusted her. Now, in every village, there is always one person who sees what others refuse to look at. One person who asks the questions that make everyone uncomfortable. In this village, that person was an old blind man called Tote Kengo. Tote Kengo had lost his sight many years ago, but the elders said that when his eyes closed to this world, they opened to another. He could smell rain 2 days before it arrived. He could hear a lie the moment it left someone's lips. And he could sense danger the way a river senses a storm upstream, long before anyone else felt a single drop. One evening, as the village settled into the amber glow of sunset, Tote Kengo sat outside his hut. A young man named Dubom, strong, proud, and very fond of Mama Obele's cooking, was walking past, picking his teeth after yet another glorious meal. Dubom, Tote Kengo called, his voice like dry leaves scraping stone. Dubom stopped. Yes, Tota. You have eaten at that woman's stall again. Dubom chuckled. Of course, Tota. Everyone eats there. Her food is the best in 7 villages. The old man was quiet for a long moment. Then he spoke, and his words were slow, deliberate, like someone placing stones across a river, one by one. Tell me, Dubom. Have you ever been to her kitchen? Her kitchen? No, Tota. No one goes to her kitchen. She prepares everything before dawn and brings it to the market. And that does not trouble you? Dubom frowned. Why should it? The food is delicious. Tote Kengo turned his blind eyes toward the young man, and even without sight, his gaze felt heavier than the earth itself. A river that is sweet on the surface may carry poison underneath. Not everything that tastes good is good. Remember that. Dubom laughed nervously, shook his head, and walked away. But that night, he did not sleep well. The old man's words crawled under his skin like tiny ants, biting softly, refusing to be ignored. Days passed. Weeks passed. And Mama Obele's business continued to bloom like a flower that knows no season. But then, something strange began to happen. It started with small things. Things that, alone, meant nothing. But together, they formed a shadow. Adiz, the palm wine tapper's wife, who ate at Mama Obele's stall every single day, began to fall ill. Her skin grew pale. Her energy drained like water from a cracked pot. The village healer gave her herbs, but nothing worked. Then it was Okafor, the strong woodcutter. A man who could split a log with a single stroke. He began to grow weak. His hands trembled. His legs could no longer carry him to the forest. Then Nkechi. Then Emeka. Then the trader's daughter. One by one, the most loyal customers of Mama Obele began to wither. Slowly. Quietly. Like trees being eaten from the inside by termites. But here is the thing, and listen carefully, for this is where the lesson hides. No one connected it to the food. Why? Because Mama Obele was kind. She was generous. She smiled. She gave extra portions to children. She let the poor eat on credit. She was everyone's mama. And who suspects a mother? But Dubom could not forget the blind man's words. They played in his mind like a drum that would not stop beating. So one night, when the moon hid behind clouds as if it too did not want to see what was about to be revealed, Dubom decided to do what no one in the village had ever done. He decided to follow Mama Obele. He decided to see her kitchen. Dubom waited until the deepest hour of the night, that hour when even the spirits argue about whether it is still night or already morning. He crept through the village like a shadow stitched to the earth. Past the sleeping huts. Past the dying embers of cooking fires. Past the goats that murmured in their pens. Mama Obele lived on the far side of the village, near the thick bush that bordered the river. Her compound was surrounded by a fence of woven bamboo, taller than any fence in the village. Strange, Dubom had always thought, but never questioned. After all, a woman living alone needed protection. That was the explanation everyone accepted. He found a gap in the fence, narrow, but enough for a determined young man. He squeezed through. And what he saw? The compound was larger than he expected. Behind the main hut, there was a second structure, a kitchen, yes, but not like any kitchen he had ever seen. It was built low to the ground, with walls of thick clay, and the windows were sealed shut with dark cloth. Smoke rose from a chimney, but the smoke was not the clean white smoke of honest firewood. It was green. Faintly green. Like the color of something that should not be burned. Dubom pressed his eye against the crack in the wall. Inside, Mama Obele stood over a massive pot, bigger than any pot he had ever seen. She was stirring slowly, humming a song that had no melody he recognized. It sounded ancient. It sounded wrong. And surrounding her, on the floor, on shelves, hanging from the ceiling, were things that made Dubom's blood freeze. Dried roots twisted into shapes that resembled human figures. Powders of colors that did not exist in nature, deep purple, sickly yellow, midnight black. Bottles filled with liquids that seemed to move on their own, as if something lived inside them. And bones. Small bones. Animal bones, he hoped they were animal bones, arranged in patterns on the ground around the pot. Mama Obele reached into a clay jar and pulled out a handful of dark powder. She whispered words over it, words from no language spoken in that village, and dropped it into the pot. The pot hissed. The green smoke thickened. And then she laughed. Not the warm, belly-shaking laugh the village knew. No. This laugh was cold, thin. It slithered through the air like a snake through wet grass. Eat, my children, she whispered to the pot. Eat, and give me what is yours. Your strength. Your years. Your life. Give it to Mama. Dubon's hand flew to his mouth to stop himself from screaming. Now he understood. Now he understood why she never aged. Why her body grew larger and stronger while her customers grew thin and weak. Why she cooked before dawn, in secret, behind sealed windows. She was feeding on them. Not with teeth. Not with claws. But with the very food they trusted. Every meal was a spell. Every bite was a slow theft, stealing their vitality, their health, their years, and feeding it all into herself. The food was the weapon. And trust was the door she walked through. Dubon ran. He ran like a man whose feet had been set on fire. He ran to the only person who would believe him. Tota Kengo. The blind man was already sitting up when Dubon arrived, as if he had been expecting him. Perhaps he had. You saw it, Tota Kengo said. It was not a question. Yes, Tota. Dubon was trembling. She is using the food. She is taking their lives through the food. The old man nodded slowly. I smelled it. For years, I smelled it. The food carried something unclean. But no one would listen to a blind old man when their bellies were full and their tongues were happy. What do we do, Tota? The old man stood, and for a blind man, he stood with the authority of a king. We wake the village. We shoot them. But Dubon, hear me well, she will not go quietly. A woman who has tasted the power of stolen years does not surrender like a thief caught with yams. Be ready. And so, before dawn, the very hour when Mama Obele would begin her dark cooking, Dubon gathered the village elders, the chief, the healer, and every strong man he could find. They went to her compound. They broke through the bamboo fence. When they entered the kitchen, they found everything exactly as Dubon described. The pot, the powders, the bones, the bottles, the patterns on the floor. Mama Obele stood in the center of it all, and for the first time, the village saw her true face. Not the smiling, generous cook, but a woman twisted by greed, her eyes wide, her voice no longer sweet but sharp and venomous. You have no right, she screamed. I fed you. I gave you everything. Without me, you would starve. But the chief, a man of few words and firm decisions, raised his hand. You did not feed us, Obele. You farmed us. You planted poison in our trust and harvested our lives. That is not feeding. That is devouring. The village healer stepped forward, cast sacred herbs into the great pot, and as the flames consumed the dark mixture, a wail rose from the pot, a sound not of this world, and the green smoke turned white, then vanished. Mama Obele fell to her knees. Her body, so large and powerful, began to shrink. The stolen years, the stolen strength, they were leaving her, returning to the wind, seeking their rightful owners. Within moments, she was no longer the mighty Mama Obele. She was just old, small, empty. The village banished her that very morning. She walked into the forest and was never seen again. Some say she perished before nightfall. Others say she wanders still, searching for another village, another pot, another group of people who will eat without asking questions. And so, the village healed. Slowly. Those who had been sick began to recover. Adis regained her color. Okafor lifted his axe again. The children played without tiring. But the village was never the same, and it should not have been. Because a lesson paid for in suffering must never be forgotten.